Hey, what's up? My name is Ren. Welcome back to the studio. You know, sketching has always helped me see the world a bit differently. It's not just about capturing what's in front of me, but more so about translating what I see through thought, feeling, and movement. When I draw, there's just this immediate connection between my art tools, my senses, and my imagination. Sketching just really grounds me into the process. It helps me to investigate what I notice and begin to make sense of the shapes and stories that live in my environment. That's why in today's video, I want to share with you my sketchbook tour. It's the art journal where I've been exploring line and form and flow, and I just want to share some reflections with you about where I am in my artist journey and where I am in my sketchbook process at this time. So definitely grab your sketchbook, grab a few simple art supplies, let's get cozy and get into this sketchbook tour. Drawing and sketching for me, even though very repetitive in motion, it's really become a silent reconnection to flow and presence for me. It just really pulls me out of thinking and more into feeling. You know, I talk often about my relationship with perfection and how it just tends to linger at the end of every page. You know, that's why at the beginning of this sketchbook, I really made the intentional decision to use pen and ink only, no pencil, no erasing. In the past, I used to love to use a lot of pencil in my sketchbooks, but I just found myself erasing my natural marks and just really what wanted to come forward from my hands. So in this sketchbook process, in this art journal, it was really an invitation to surrender to the process. Whatever line or mark emerged from my hands would simply be that. I wanted it to be a record of my hands in that exact moment. Imperfect, but honest. And I shared this sketchbook with you before in my video where I talked about my art journal. And in the process of art journaling, which I have my other little art journal here, but in the process of art journaling, I began to just notice these honest marks that wanted to come forward from my hands. And it just really inspired me to dive deeper into this process. So I use themes a lot in this art journal to really guide myself through the process. And I started this sketchbook and art journal off by just centering myself around keywords and themes and wrote a few sentences just to give myself clarity through this space. And I wanted to just reflect on some of these themes today that I shared with you in the past. So in this sketchbook, I really wanted to use simplicity as a form of depth and letting line and form really speak for themselves a little bit louder than getting into the, getting into the realism or the detail of whatever I was drawing. And I wanted to make honest marks about what truly mattered. And what matters to me right now is what is just coming forward naturally for me. And, that's why I love to use nature as a language, nature as a teacher, because when I observe nature, trees and flowers, branches and leaves, they truly just accept their natural forms, like however they're growing, if they're growing crooked, if they're growing, in whatever way, they just accept their natural state and form and the beauty that comes with that. So I wanted to use natural forms just to guide myself through this process and just noticing what came forward to me in any given moment. And these pages really just became a conversation between me and my art tools, my intuition, my imagination, and the page. And on this next page, every time I look at this page, I love it because I was really exploring how lines move across a page. And I use this simple form here of this branch. I'm going to turn this sketchbook around so you can really see. You can really see the echoes of the shape. And I was very curious about how lines move across a page and how lines, when grouped together, they can make simple shapes. And what I discovered was these lines, when you group them together and you form these simple shapes, these shapes really interpret the way that we think about things, right? Like, for instance, these lines grouped together form this natural curve that echoes the curve of this branch. And when you think about curves, you think about softness, right? And that's how we interpret a curve or a bend or something that has, a sort of curve to it. Our mind instantly shifts towards like softness, softening the edges. And it just became really interesting to me how complex meanings can really be broken down into simple terms. And it's really about how you're seeing the thing. And this all started from simple lines grouped together to make simple forms that make simple shapes. And I just found that so fascinating. So I love this page, and I love how the echo of what I drew, it's not super realistic. I wasn't going for mimicking every single branch that I saw and drawing it in its realist form. I just wanted to capture the essence of this branch. On this page, I started noticing more about movement, about the movement of the eye, how the eye naturally moves from left to right, how this branch is moving from left to right. And I made the connection between this left to right movement and how we naturally see things. We naturally see things on a page from left to right because that's how we were taught. That's how we were taught to follow and read line, because that's how we learn to read, from left to right. And I became really curious about that rhythm and how my hands seem to move naturally in that same direction without much thought, really without thinking about it at all. Maybe because I'm right-handed, yes. But I mean, really, when you think about it, we learned to look at pages from left to right. And we just naturally gravitate towards that way of seeing things. But it also made me realize how much of drawing is really very instinctual, and how there's a kind of language between the eyes and the hands that don't really need words. Drawing is such a universal language. I think if you give any child a drawing tool, you give them a marker, you give them a crayon, and they naturally want to draw. It's just this instinctual language that we all understand. So I love the movement of all the lines across this page. I just love how it shows my hand naturally curving and moving in this way, and how the connection between the line and my eyes and the page just really showed me about instinctual movement, how the eye naturally wants to see things. Now, I call this sketchbook an art journal, not really because I journaled in this book every day, because I have my smaller art journal that I shared with you before that I do connect with pretty much daily. And that art journal was definitely the inspiration for this one. But using the sketchbook as an art journal really gave me the permission to use this space for reflection along my journey. And I don't know if this happens to you as well, but whenever I'm in the process of making, just random thoughts will just pop into my mind. They may be things that are related to the process, but it actually sometimes, and a lot of the times, it's not. It's about me making the connection with whatever's going on the page, with whatever is happening in my mind or in my life, but things just usually begin to pop up in my mind, and I just love to get those thoughts down on paper. And diving deep into the moment, I really wanted to try to really capture what this flower, what this contour drawing was really showing me. So, like for instance, I talked to you about this page where I was noticing how the eye naturally likes to move from left to right. So I thought on this page I would start from the right and bring it down to the left and sort of reverse that motion and allow my eyes to see in a different way. And I really wanted to honor the shape of what I was drawing, but also I wanted to use my imagination. And I often do this when I approach contour drawing. I love to maybe exaggerate shapes or add extra petals. It's really about allowing myself to feel more into the process and getting into whatever direction, following whatever direction my mind wants to go in that moment. And that's really the beauty of drawing. It's really the beauty of drawing, like I said, with pen and not erasing your marks, because you're really just honestly flowing with wherever your mind takes you and wherever you want to go in that moment. And isn't that just such a beautiful process to just allow yourself to simply be in that one simple moment? On this page, I started to think about the echoes of shapes, and you're going to see me mention that again, but I was just using forms that I had around me and just thinking about shapes in different ways. I love this, the scraggly branches here, and really just the scraggly little lines. If you see these florals up close, you can see all these scraggly little lines from how the flower dried, and I think they're just so interesting. They're just so interesting and beautiful. And I wanted to just capture just the little scraggly lines in all these little branches and just zoom in on the branch. And this page is what I was telling you about before. I really, I can't express to you enough how much I love this page, because what's interesting to me is that when you break this down, this shape is it's very simple. They're really just lines. But when you group all of these lines together, it just forms an interesting shape. And how beautiful of nature to use something so simple as a line in a pine needle and group them together to make this amazing, amazing and beautiful shape of a pine that grows into this large pine tree. So I thought that was just so interesting, and I loved the movement of the lines in different direction. It was really about freedom and freeing my marks and practicing the movement of my hands in different directions and just letting go. Letting go of perfection in that process for me was just so beautiful. I just love the freedom and the wildness that comes with making marks in all of these different directions. I think nature is just so beautiful and so honest and so imperfect. And it's just such a beautiful teacher how something so complex as a large and beautiful pine tree, when you break it down, it becomes these simple shapes. How gorgeous. This page was about capturing simple moments. It was really just about seeing with simplicity. You know, whenever I draw, there's always a temptation to complicate the process, to keep adding more lines. But you know, one thing I've noticed, this art journal, it's really taught me that sometimes less is more. And I noticed that whenever I try to capture every single nuance, every single fragment, it can really drive out the spirit of what drew me into that subject in the first place. You know, as artists, the observed world is our inspiration, but I've learned just to hold on to those observations loosely, to not get caught up in the process of precision or perfection. It's about trusting your sight and trusting your interpretation, because every artist sees the world differently. So drawing this flower was a return to the essential. It was just a return to what feels whole and true, because I believe there's a quiet wisdom in simplicity. When I strip things back to their simplest form, I'm reminded that art never really asks us for more. It often asks us for less, just enough to capture a feeling or a gesture. And these quiet studies remind me why I began drawing in the first place. It's to see with clarity and to connect with what's right in front of me. And really to find beauty in these small, in-between spaces. Because sometimes the truest expression lives in what's left unsaid.